Hey everyone, and welcome to the second episode of Mountain Beast Radio.
Number 2.
My name is Justin Chernipeski, and I'm here with my co-host, Doug Mackay. Tonight we're going to be talking about probably one of the most famous hauntings in North America, I think. Or at least in like the top 5.
I'd say it's probably world-renowned.
It's up there. The Amityville hauntings. Or the Amityville murders. Or both.
The Amityville horror. The true horror.
It's a crazy story.
There's a lot that happened and a lot that followed. So I'm going to kind of take the lead on this one. So I'll just dive right in. So in the quiet, peaceful waterfront community of Amityville, New York, a vicious and murderous act would rock the village and spawn one of the most famous ghost stories of our time. The DeFeo family murders went from brutal slangs that shook a quaint town to its core to books and big screens telling stories of demons and ghosts that would run a family out of their home. Tonight, I'm going to walk you through what really happened on the night of November 13th, 1974, and separate the truth from the fiction of the Amityville horror. So the DeFeo family was made up of Ronald DeFeo Sr., who was 44, his wife Louise, who was 42, their daughters Dawn, who was 18, and Allison, who was 13, their sons Ronald Jr., aka Butch, who was 23, Mark, who was 12, and John, who was 9. They moved to 112 Ocean Avenue, Amityville, from Brooklyn in 1965. Ronald Sr. worked for his father-in-law at his Buick dealership and provided his family with a pretty comfortable lifestyle. Unfortunately, this comfortable lifestyle didn't help prevent issues in the family's home, as Ronald Sr. was said to be short-tempered and aggressive with his family, especially with their oldest son, Butch. As Butch got older, he began fighting back against his father, often physically, and during an argument between his mother and father, he pulled a shotgun on his dad and tried to shoot him, but the gun didn't fire. When his parents felt they had exhausted all their options in dealing with Butch, meaning trying to get him psychiatric help that he refused and was enraged by, they decided that gifts and money would get him to behave. This obviously backfired, and by 17, Butch was using heroin and LSD and was expelled from school for violent behavior. For some reason, his parents continued to supply him with money, and when he was 18, he landed a cushy job at the Buick dealership with his dad and granddad. This job required very little work on his part, and he had little to no responsibility placed on him. Most of the money he earned went towards cars, guns, alcohol, and drugs. Basically just your, I don't want to say typical rich kid, but stereotypical rich kid, we'll say that.
Yeah, and he was clearly unstable, like, way before the incident at Amityville.
Yeah, he was violent and, like, a drug user. I mean, LSD is whatever, but I mean, heroin, that's I don't know what heroin was like in the 70s, but
I don't know, I'm sure it was still pretty heavy.
Probably hit pretty hard. So Butch, being the spoiled, drug-addicted rich kid he was, decided earning money by doing barely anything just wasn't enough, and began looking at even less legitimate ways of pulling in cash. At one point, he was given the job of depositing more than $20,000 in the bank for the dealership. This seemed to be the opportunity he was waiting for, and he planned a mock robbery with a friend of his, promising that they would split the cash. The robbery went according to plan, but derailed when police came to talk to Butch at the dealership. He flew into a rage and refused to cooperate with police. Obviously, his father became suspicious, and when he questioned Butch about it, Butch threatened to kill him. So that took place in October, shortly before the November 13th.
That's what I call foreshadowing.
That's a little more than foreshadowing. That's
a very,
that's
very good
red,
sign.
That's a red flag right there.
Yeah.
If you've ever been threatened by your child, if your child has ever threatened your life,
it's time to do something about it.
Yeah, put them up for adoption. I don't know. So at about 3 a.m. on November 13th, 1974, Butch followed through with this threat. He grabbed a .35 caliber Marlin rifle, went to his parents' bedroom where they were sleeping, and he shot his father first through his kidney and out his chest, then again in the spine with the bullet lodging in his neck. He then shot his mother twice and proceeded to his brother's room and shot them both once, and then to his sister's room and shot them both once at close range. Evidence suggests Louise and Allison were awake when they were killed, and police reports state that all the family members were found laying face down in their beds, which is real weird, considering 8 shots are fired. They think it took place in about 15 minutes. So, I mean, no one got out of bed to see what was going on. No one hid or ran. It seemed like everyone continued to lay in bed. And weird, like, I mean, I don't find laying on my stomach comfortable at all, but apparently this whole family did.
See, I like to lie on my stomach when I'm sleeping. I find it comfortable.
I can't do it.
But, like, you can imagine, like, his siblings. It'd be pretty easy to, like, point a gun at them and be like, lie on your stomach. Or, tell them what to do, or, like, shoot them and then move them.
Another theory that I had heard, but even if you shot them and moved them, there'd still be evidence that you didn't shoot them in their back, right? Like, if they're not, if they weren't laying on their stomach.
Right.
But, I mean, one of the theories that I had heard is that maybe he obviously he shot his parents first. The evidence for that is clear. So, I mean, the fact that Dawn is 18, I feel like she would have been up and moving around. But there's some weird stuff about that later. But, I mean, the little kids, it could have been that he went into their rooms, because he went to his brother's rooms first, and they were 12 and 9. So he could have just been like, someone's in the house, lay on, like, stay in bed kind of thing, like, and then kill them.
Blanket.
Yeah, kind of thing like that, which would make that even more sinister. Also, his sisters, there's evidence that they were shot at, like, close range. Dawn had residue on her nightgown, which some people believe means that she shot the weapon, but it could just be because she was shot at such close range.
Right.
So after he killed his family, he showered, got dressed, collected his clothes and the gun, and proceeded to dump them on his way to work at about 6 a.m., which I imagine was probably real early for Butch to be showing up for work, considering his work ethic. He pretended that he didn't know why his father hadn't shown up to work, and even called home a couple times to fake concern. He left work around lunchtime and spent the day with his friends, telling them he hadn't heard from his family all day. Around 6:30 p.m. that same day, Butch ran into a bar located not too far from his house, yelling, "You gotta help me. I think my mother and father are shot."
I hope his acting was better than that, Doug.
"You gotta help me. I think my mother and father are shot."
There we go.
That's
I like to see the emotion come.
Butch and a small group from the bar went back to the house and found the family dead. Butch was taken into protective custody when he told police the murders may have been committed by a mob hitman, claiming that his family had involvement with the mob. When the police searched the house, they found a box for the Marlin gun in Butch's room, and when the timeline of the murders was put together, police realized Butch would have been home at the time of the murders. The following day, Butch confessed to the murders, stating, quote, "Once I started, I just couldn't stop. It went so fast." End quote.
So he was fully aware of his actions.
Well, I mean, like, he hid the evidence. He lied about it for the whole day, and then had his false evidence, or his false the misdirection that he gave to the police initially. So, I mean, obviously he knew that he had done something wrong and was trying to avoid getting caught.
So the idea of him being, like, under the will of some, like, unknown force or paranormal
I mean, he
came afterwards.
His defense was insanity. I'll get to that. So his trial began October 14th, 1975. His defense lawyer, William Weber, tried to prove that Butch was not guilty by reason of insanity, and that the murders were in self-defense, as he had heard the voices of his family plotting against him. So basically, their initial defense was he was hearing voices of his family. Some people claim that he had actually heard demonic voices, but I feel like choosing the voices of his family worked better in court anyway, or would have worked better in court had psychiatrists not proven that he was well aware. But yeah, so basically, he claimed that he had heard his family plotting against him in his head, and basically said if they didn't kill me, or if I didn't kill them, they would kill me first. So the defense's psychiatrist, Dr. Daniel Schwartz, supported the insanity plea, but the psychiatrist for the prosecution, Dr. Harold Zolan, maintained that though Butch abused heroin and LSD and had antisocial personality disorder, he wasn't insane, like out of his mind, and he knew what he was doing at the time of the murders. So on November 21st, 1975, Butch was found guilty of 6 counts of second-degree murder and sentenced to 6 consecutive life sentences, and is currently 66 years old. That's a lot of sixes. 66 years old in Sullivan Correctional Facility. So there are some controversies with the case due to some pretty strange circumstances. Obviously, why were all the family members found face down with no signs of struggle? Surely, someone would have heard the shots and gotten up to investigate, or better yet, hide. And there was a theory that they had been drugged, but there was no traces of drugs in anyone's systems, and no evidence was found of any suppression equipment being used on the weapon. And there's an idea that maybe he had used the silencer or something like that, and then it just wasn't found when they found the rest of the evidence. If he had taken it off the weapon before he dumped it.
It could be pretty hard to get like a suppressor for a 35 Marlin, which is like a lever action back then.
Man, you knew that? Like,
seems like
I had to look at pictures to see what this gun looked like. Unless it was some sort of like thing he just kind of rigged up, but even then, like, there was none of the neighbors even claimed to hear anything. One neighbor said that all they heard was the dog barking. So it's a weird. Unless the house was soundproof, I don't know. Like,
maybe he took the oil filter off of his truck and.
Is that a thing?
Oh yeah.
Oh yeah. Okay. So that's one. It's kind of weird that like no one heard anything. I guess if you heard the dog barking, you'd think you'd only hear 8 gunshots in the middle of the night. But yeah. So as of right now, I couldn't find any like real answers to those questions. But over the years, Butch has made a few changes to his story. So one variation of his story is that his sister Dawn had killed their father, and then his mother, in a moment of what I assume he implies was distraught insanity, killed the rest of the family before he killed his mother. So basically, Dawn came in, killed their dad, the mom lost her mind, killed everyone else except him, and then he killed his mom in self-defense. Which sounds bananas.
Yeah, why would she do that?
Yeah, like, where's the reason for her to be like, you killed your dad, I have to kill all of you now.
We gotta finish the job now.
Yeah, it doesn't make any sense. So a few years later, Butch claimed that Dawn and an unknown assailant killed his parents, and Dawn proceeded to kill their siblings, and he only killed Dawn by accident while struggling to get the gun from her.
But there's not many signs of like.
There's no evidence of another person in the house, like an unknown assailant,
or
right?
A struggle like that.
Yeah, no, like her body wouldn't have been found in her bed with no trace of like her being killed anywhere else, right? Yeah. He's also got some other wild stories that he has told. These ones, there's a lot of people apparently online that believe his sister did it. I don't agree with that, considering she was found in her bed as well. But yeah, like I personally side with the courts. The evidence points to him as the culprit, and his stories have changed so much with time, it's impossible to take any of them seriously, especially with like the I guess the implications of what it would mean if they were true. Like his mom would have had to be insane to be like, you killed your dad, now I have to kill all of you. Like, What is that? Like, doesn't make any sense. So that's basically the murders and the trial and everything. That's what we know for sure.
I heard in a documentary that, like, another theory is that Butch was, like, he was, like, under the influence of whatever drugs. He was sitting on the couch watching, like, a war movie. There's gunshots going off in the movie. And that's why, they don't notice the gunshots and wake up because he's already blaring this, like, movie on TV.
Maybe.
But I still, like...
The degree of sound...
If you know how loud like, a rifle is, it's pretty freaking loud.
Like, you shoot a gun and you can feel it, like, in your chest.
Yeah, like, and your eardrums just blow out.
Yeah, and especially indoors, like, that sound...
Confined space.
Yeah, like, it's going to be a lot louder. I don't know if they did a toxicology test on him to see if he was under the influence of drugs at the time. I didn't find anything about that. But, I mean, he was an LSD and heroin user, so I imagine... I don't know any heroin users, but I imagine they use fairly regularly, as much as possible. And if you're rich, it's pretty possible to do it on a regular basis, I'd assume. So chances are he was probably high on something.
Yeah. And it was also stated that like a lady approached him while he was watching this movie. She was in like a dark cloak with a hood and handed him the rifle. I don't know if like
that's just some documentary thing that you watched.
Yeah, but the guy was in the documentary, like Butch.
Oh well, was he the one saying this story though? Because he pretty much discredited himself with the.
Well, he seems to have changed the story throughout time.
Yeah, so I mean, like that whole thing could be just him being like, I'm trying to lose some of the guilt.
Or he's trying to make himself actually look insane.
Well, that too, but I mean, at this point, I don't think he's gonna get sent to any mental institution. Where was I? Okay, so now we can kind of jump into what is arguably one of the most well-known ghost stories of our time, the Amityville Horror, which is a book by American author Jay Anson, published in September 1977, and it's based on the accounts of George and Kathy Lutz and their 3 children. So, story goes, George and Kathy purchased the house for the bargain price of $80,000, which I don't know what inflation is now. I don't know what that would be nowadays, but it sounds like a hell of a deal.
Yeah.
Especially because it was a 3-story home and
had some fancy windows on it.
Yeah, real creepy fancy windows. And they moved in on December 19th, 1975, just 13 months after the murders took place.
And they only stayed there for how many days? 28?
28 days, yeah. So a lot of the DeFeo family's furniture was actually still part of the house. Like it was sold with the house as part of the deal. That's which, I mean, creepy. I'll buy my own.
Yeah, I'd get rid of that right away.
I'll bring my own. After a friend of George learned the history of the house, they decided to have it blessed. When the priest began the blessing, he claimed he heard a manly voice demand that he get out. And he left the house, but didn't tell the Lutzes about what he heard, and instead tried calling them a week later to tell them to stay out of the room he had heard the voice in, but the call was cut short by static. After his visit, the priest supposedly developed a high fever and blisters on his hands similar to stigmata.
I also heard the priest went upstairs when he was blessing it, and there was a bedroom, and he basically recommended to the Lutzes don't use this room as a bedroom. Don't have anyone sleep in here. It's bad. I don't feel good about it.
I imagine that's probably a variation of him trying to make the phone call to tell them
oh yeah,
don't
probably
go into that room, because that's where he had heard this manly voice be get out. So some of the claims by the Lutz's family are that George would wake up at 3:15 a.m. every night and go out to check the boathouse, only to discover that was the approximate time of the DeFeo murders. The house was apparently plagued by swarms of flies, even though it was the middle of December. And I don't know, if you live up north, flies tend to disappear around this time of year, October, November.
Yeah, flies are weird though. In the winter when it gets cold out, a lot of times flies in your house, or if they're in a windowsill, they won't actually die. They'll go into a...
Oh really?
Yeah, they'll their bodies will kind of shut down, and when it warms up again, they won't technically come back to life because they're already alive, but
those
kind of
frogs
puts them in a sleep, a hibernation kind of.
Like those frogs that sleep under ice for half the year.
Exactly.
So Kathy began having vivid nightmares about the murders, and the children even began sleeping on their stomachs, similar to how the bodies were found. But I mean, they might just be comfortable to other people, not me personally. But Kathy would feel like she was being held in a loving manner by an unseen entity, which I mean, okay. Have you seen the movie? I think it's called the Dark Room or the Black Room or something like that. It's on Netflix.
No.
The
I don't
opening
think so.
scene is like a ghost sex scene. It is the funniest thing I have ever seen in my life. Check it out on Netflix. It's hilarious. And that was the first thing I thought of when I read that. So George discovered a small hidden room known as the Red Room. It's painted all red.
Red rum. Red rum.
That supposedly didn't show up on the blueprints of the house. And it seemed to scare their dog, as it wouldn't go near the room and would cower in fear if it got too close to the door.
Oh, speaking of the dog, sorry to cut you off.
Yeah.
In the documentary I also watched, George Lutz himself said that within like the first hour of moving into the house, he claimed the dog tried to kill itself.
How does a dog do that?
What he said was like the dog was in the backyard or whatever, and there was a fence, and like they found the dog hanging by its collar, like on the top of the fence, like it tried to maybe like jump over, and the collar got snagged, and it was like on the other side of the fence, it's like hanging there.
Jesus.
But he said like, oh yeah, like within an hour the dog tried to kill itself.
That's a pretty bold claim when it could have just been the dog jumping over the fence and getting caught, if that even happened.
Very plausible.
Yeah, considering like I know of a couple people whose dogs have died from being tangled in their collar and stuff.
Yeah.
So there were drastic temperature changes and random odors ranging from perfume to shit, basically, throughout the house.
Which also could very well be perfume or
shit. Apparently they couldn't be explained by drafts or piping. George and Kathy claimed to see an image of a demon with half its head blown off in the back of the fireplace, like burned into the soot. Their 5-year-old daughter developed an imaginary friend named Jody, described as a demonic pig creature with glowing red eyes.
Right.
Which is a real fun image. So this one's creepy. Like really, like picture it as I walk you through what it is.
Okay.
So George goes out to do his 3:15 a.m. check on the boathouse, right? He turns to head back inside and looks up at the window of his 5-year-old daughter's room, only to see her looking down at him with this demon pig standing behind her. Okay, so that in itself, like you're looking up at your daughter's room and your daughter's looking down and there's like this demonic pig thing standing behind her. Right? Yeah. So there's two figures, you're like, what in the world? So he rushes back inside, goes up to her room and finds her fast asleep and the rocking chair in the corner slowly rocking back and forth. So this is just a little note of my own. A little tip from me to you: stop putting rocking chairs in your kids' rooms, okay?
Because all they chairs do, for one, are creepy.
Yeah, all they do is end up rocking on their own ever.
No,
like no one sits in a rocking chair is like, this is nice. I've never enjoyed a rocking chair.
No, and they're usually like actually pretty uncomfortable.
Yeah, especially like if it's like a fully wood one.
Yeah,
no cushions or anything, and like, you know, you're an adult. You don't have to rock back and forth. You're not a child, okay? So just get rid of rocking chairs. I just totally turned off like a whole bunch of listeners who really enjoy rocking chairs. But just saying, rocking chairs are just creepy and you don't need them.
No. And a lot of people go the extra distance and put like a creepy doll on it.
Yeah, like it's a decoration or something. Like, just get a lazy boy that reclines and have a nap. So George claimed to hear the front door slamming, but when he would investigate, he would find the dog sleeping peacefully at the front door. Which, I mean, a dog who tried to kill itself probably wouldn't sleep peacefully ever in that house, but whatever. No one else ever heard the noises. He also claimed to hear a marching band or a radio station not quite on the right frequency downstairs, but when he would get downstairs, the sounds would stop. Which, I mean, I don't know what the relevance of that is. Yeah. So Kathy claimed while laying in bed that she received red welts from an unseen force and was levitated off the bed, which is a pretty common thing, or claim, I guess. She claimed that locks, doors, and windows would be mysteriously damaged. And on January 1st, 1976, cloven hoof prints appeared in the snow outside the house. Apparently green slime oozed from the walls in the hall and the keyhole in the playroom door in the attic, which is a weird place to have a playroom. A 12-inch crucifix hung on the wall rotated until it was upside down, and it gave off a sour smell. George saw Kathy... This one's weird. George saw Kathy transform into an old woman. White hair, wrinkled and gross, saliva dripping from a toothless mouth.
Yeah.
I mean, that's what you signed up for when you got married, man. That's that's your future. Get used to it, Georgie boy.
That's harsh.
On January 8th, 1976, George and Kathy decided to try to bless the house themselves, because obviously if the priest couldn't do it, we totally can.
Yeah.
And while reciting the Lord's Prayer, George heard a symphony of voices chanting, "Will you stop?" After a second attempt by George and Kathy to bless the house, they experienced what would be their last night in the house. They didn't go into detail about the last night there, claiming it was, quote, too frightening, unquote, but after only 28 days in the house, they decided to move.
And when they moved, they boogied, apparently.
Apparently, yeah.
They fled. I guess it was pretty chaotic that last night.
Yeah, well, I don't like that excuse, though. Like, it was too scary to talk about. Like, talk about it. Like, you talked about all this other stuff that would terrify anyone. Like, you all made it out alive. So it didn't, it wasn't lethal. So just let us know what happened. I'm curious.
I thought they explained what happened.
Well, according to this, it was just too frightening on that last night. And yeah, apparently, like, they had hired a crew to move, like, to go back and get all their stuff, because they were too scared to go back and get it. And they claimed that nothing happened while they were in the house, the moving crew.
Right. So here's a quote from George. I was lying in bed and everyone was asleep, and Kathy lifts up off the bed and starts to slide away from the bed and away from me. I feel something get in the bed with us. I'm unable to move. I hear the kids' beds continually slamming up and down on the floor and being dragged. We heard these pigeons on the air conditioner top overhead from the master bedroom, and they're fluttering all night long, and yet there are no pigeons there the next morning, or any nests, or anything like that. The lights flickered. We brought the dog up to stay right by the bedroom. We tied him right to the doorknob, and he's up going in circles and throwing up all night. The boys came down in the morning absolutely frightened. They were unable to get down to me. I was unable to get up to them. Missy came in and just asked what was that all about.
Missy was her 5-year-old daughter.
Yeah. Kathy had no memory of it. That day we spent trying to get a hold of Father Ray, and he said all the right words. Unquote. And they fled.
Okay.
I don't know.
That's a little weird.
Yeah.
Pretty mean to just tie the dog up and be like, too bad you're here.
Well, tie the dog up that already tried to choke himself.
Yeah. So, like I said, it's a great story. Unfortunately, for the wannabe believer in me, it's simply that, a story. Many of the claims have been disputed. The priest that did the blessing, for example, claimed first that his contact with the family was only via telephone, only to change his story later on to more closely resemble that story.
There's a lot of story changes that have happened.
And they continue to. Also, the claim of the hoof prints in the snow was proven to be a lie when weather reports showed that there was no snow on the date that they had claimed it happened. There were no unusual reports by neighbors in the time that the Lutzes stayed there, nor were there any calls made to the police by the Lutzes, as was claimed in the book. The real kicker, though, William Weber, Butch's DeFeo's defense lawyer, did I say Butch's DeFeo's? Butch DeFeo's defense lawyer admitted that the story was a hoax he had cooked up with the Lutzes over many bottles of wine. George still claims that the events in the book are, quote, mostly true, and denies any dishonesty on his part. With all that said, the books and the movies sold for a reason. The Amityville horror is compelling, creepy, and the murders that took place only add to it. Ethically, some may see this as profiting on tragedy, and to an extent, I think it is, but I'd be a liar if I didn't admit that the story scared the crap out of me growing up, and learning more about the murders that took place has kept a bit of that creepy factor to this day. I may not believe it's haunted, but you aren't going to find me sleeping in a house where 6 people were murdered, by any means.
Well, that you know about.
Well, I guess. I'm pretty sure no one was murdered in my house.
See, it's like, I don't know. it's a very great opportunity to jump in and like make your millions.
Yeah, well, and that was the thing is like as soon as
it's a crazy story.
As soon as the money was rolling in, like everyone just started suing each other. Apparently, that's why Weber came out and said that it was a hoax cooked up because the Lutzes had sued him, so he countersued. Like there was just a mess of lawsuits being thrown around for like I believe defamation and then rights to names and mental stress and stuff like that. Like it's a real weird thing for any like mystery or I mean in general it gets weird when money gets thrown into stuff, but I mean when it comes to trying to prove something is a legit thing and then all of a sudden people are upset because of the money they're making off it, well, it's not it takes away that credibility. It seems more like totally a cash grab than anything else. Now a lot of people bring up the photo that was taken,
the photo of the child,
the little boy.
I think it looks really creepy. But
it looks creepy, yeah. But I mean,
like we just looked into that.
Yeah, and looking even closer at it, it looks like a person wearing glasses if you zoom in on it. To me, anyway.
Kind of.
And I mean, as far as I know, none of the DeFeo's kids wore glasses. Well, there's a bunch of side by sides of the image of the ghost boy and I believe Mark or John. But like, yeah, like there's a lot of side by sides of the kids trying to prove that this is the image you're seeing or this is the ghost you're seeing. But it's a hard picture to judge because all you see is like the head and it's dark and blurry from the 70s and
plus this was apparently taken like sometime after.
Yeah, it wasn't taken like right away. I mean, one claim is that it was taken when the Warrens investigated, and the Warrens claimed to investigated 20 days after. Another report that I read said that the picture was taken 2 years after the Lutzes moved out. So it's hard to really nail it down as to when it really took place. So
I personally, like when I look at it, it does look like a little boy. Like it doesn't look like, it kind of looks like it has glasses, like you said, but it doesn't look like an adult.
Well, to me, when you look at it with the glasses, it looks kind of more like a female, like figure. Like I don't know. You can look at it right now. I'm gonna find it. I think it's still on my phone actually, but yeah, it just doesn't. Yeah, right there. Like if you look at it with the like as the perception of there being glasses, like it looks like an older woman to me.
But it's I don't know, man. If it's glasses or not, it's still for me like hard to tell. It could just be the way his hair is.
It could be that too, but I mean, given
to me, it looks like a little kid in pajamas. I don't know.
I can't even see its body.
Neither can I, but I'm just like
speculating that he's wearing pajamas because it's nighttime.
It could just be a kid they brought along, but said like, "Hey, go stand there."
Yeah, go be creepy. You can take some pictures.
I don't know, just because of all the money stuff and the legal stuff, it basically like makes this case for me seem very
well. And I mean, even and having the lawyer come out and be like, "Yo, we made this up."
Yeah.
Over some bottles of wine. So basically, there was this theory that the Amityville home of 112 Ocean Ave was used as kind of like an insane asylum for the Native American tribe in the area, the Shinnecock, I think it's pronounced. But that's been disputed by the tribe itself and historical evidence showing that like they were never really in the area. The closest location they would have been was about 70 miles away. So not a lot holding that up. I was just looking online. There's a Daily Mail article. I don't really know anything about the Daily Mail, reputation-wise. But apparently the eldest son, Danny Lutz, is still haunted by his ordeal.
Oh, I read that article. He's
Yeah.
like in his 40s now.
Yeah, 47. And he's claiming everything was true. I mean,
When he was a kid, he would be way more susceptible to believe any kind of
yeah,
lie.
for sure. He was 10 when they moved in, so he's 10 at the time. Yeah, definitely. Like, you're influenced by the stories you hear, that what your family, especially if it's your parents saying it.
Yeah, because you trust them.
Yeah, you're gonna be more inclined to believe them and stuff. But I mean, yeah, there's just like, I mean, the movies, the book itself, they're they're awesome. Like I think that they're really good, like, horror stories. They know like how to get into that part of your brain where you're like, what in the world? Like, this is creepy as hell. And especially being tied to this like gruesome mass killing of like,
Which was a fact. That did happen.
yeah, it did happen. But like having that tie-in with that, like, it kind of, I feel like that's kind of like an anchor that they use to bring that to tie that anchor to tie that paranormal aspect to the reality of what actually happened there. And I mean, entertainment wise, it's entertaining as hell. Even as like a fairly like a pretty big skeptic when it comes to most paranormal stuff, like those movies creeped me the hell out. Like growing up, seeing it when I was a little kid, like the original, and then I mean even The Exorcist scared the crap out of me when I was like 12. But I mean, like, seeing those movies and then seeing like the newer one, even, I mean, I was 22 when I watched the newer one, I think, with Ryan Reynolds.
I haven't even seen it.
No, when I first saw that one, I was like, what? I was 22 and I was still like, this is scary. Like, I slept, like, I barely slept that night. Like, I was I was scared. Like, it scared the crap out of me. And like, I don't even really believe in like a lot of that stuff. So there's definitely like a weird way that it gets into your head and really makes you like question like what's possible and like the reality of the world that we're living in. Like, is it all just made up stories that you don't have to worry about, or is there actually like this weird, like, this other part of life that just is just kind of lurking and like ready to scare you out of your skin, basically.
Well, and just knowing that like the murders actually like happened in the house, like going into it knowing that like these brutal, like, savage murders happened, it's really easy to be like, oh, that place has got to be haunted.
Yeah,
because these people were just executed in their beds.
Yeah, true. Like, you go into that house thinking, like, I mean, I guess
you would go into that house and just knowing that, you'd probably feel really weird. You'd probably like would physically feel it just because.
Now, supposedly it was a friend of the Lutzes who found out the history of the house, but I guess that was probably before the real. I think this could be just an old myth that I heard, but I'm pretty sure nowadays, real estate agents have to tell you if someone died in the house that you're looking at,
right,
buying or whatever. This was probably before that, and they just kind of. We're like, hey, we got a great deal on this beautiful home. How would you come check it out? And then like,
now we do have a fly problem.
There's kind of this weird green stuff that oozes out of the walls. Don't worry about it.
Smells too.
Yeah, don't. You'll get used to it. And just so you know, 6 people were murdered. What? Nothing. What? Huh? Yeah, no. Like, nowadays, I'm pretty sure they have to disclose that information to you. But back in the day, I mean, you could sell a house apparently for real cheap, and I mean, even their furniture, which is weird. How, like, I guess I said earlier I would have brought my own.
Nobody's gonna want that furniture. You know?
Yeah, I mean, I said earlier that I would have brought my own, but I guess if you didn't know the murders took place, you'd be like, sweet, free furniture.
Yeah.
Like, I mean, after I found out the murders happened, I'd be like, oh, we're gonna sell this, like, for sure. I mean, you could
burn it. I would burn it.
You could burn it, but I mean, you gotta make a little. You gotta stack a little Skrilla. Make that money. You know, make a positive out of a negative. Murdered family's furniture, pull in a little cash.
That sounds awful.
Yeah, well, no one said I was a good person. Yeah, I don't know. You got anything else you want to talk about?
Another thing I wanted to mention was that Jody, the pig entity that Missy would see all the time.
A cute little pig demon.
Yeah. I can't remember if it was like a neighbor or somebody else in the neighborhood said that there would be this like this hairless cat that would climb up on that windowsill like outside of the bedroom and would always be like trying to get in and would be like looking in.
Oh, really?
Yeah, and of course its eyes like in the dark would kind of have a glow to them.
Yeah.
So that was kind of one of the explanations that came up.
Hairless cats are gross.
They are pretty gross.
My girlfriend thinks they're the cutest thing.
Well, it'd be like the same color of a pig almost.
Yeah. Oh, yeah, for sure. Like that pinkish. I guess it depends on the cat.
Like if you were a little
kind of
kid
pink,
and you saw like if you saw that looking in your window, you'd be like,
"That's a demon." That's a pig demon. But I mean, the weird thing, like there was some other accounts of her, like talking to it or whatever.
But
like,
would it ever be inside the room or was it always outside?
Well, I don't know, but I mean, they claimed it was like an imaginary friend. So yeah. She might have based their imaginary friend off of a cat, a hairless cat, if there was one that was climbing up to her window or whatever. It would just seem like it would have to be there a lot for them to notice. Like, she's talking to this Jody thing quite a bit. Also, Jody is a real weird name for an imaginary friend. I guess
it is weird.
I guess it was the 70s.
Yeah. That would not be the first name I came up with.
Yeah. Tommy seems like a real common one for boys anyway. That's my imaginary friend Tommy.
Another important aspect of the story is that Ed and Lorraine Warren became involved after the Lutzes left.
Investigated it, which also, I mean, it helped both the story and the Warrens' reputation kind of skyrocket into the mainstream.
Totally.
I mean, the story itself, I mean, compelling, but you get these now like renowned paranormal investigators involved. Like I think the Amityville Horror was one of their first cases, and it was kind of one of the ones that kind of threw them into the mainstream eye. Yeah. It kind of carried them through all their other famous cases. So I might have to talk about them in a future episode.
Yeah, that could be an episode all in itself.
Yeah, they did a lot. So, and I mean they have their paranormal museum and stuff like that where they
like they claim, like Ed had claimed to have been like shoved, like physically in the house when during a religious incantation or something like that. And then like, I think Lorraine just felt like some seriously like.
Lorraine claimed to be a psychic, and claimed that she was convinced that the house was basically filled with demons, and just felt like these. What's the word for negative? I guess just negative energies and spirits filled the house. I personally don't believe in psychics, so I don't know.
I don't know. It's weird. Like if you have somebody that like really believes in like demons and stuff, like my grandma is like really religious. If I did something bad or if like I don't know,
it's their go-to explanation.
Yeah, you got demons and
it's like it's like Waterboy's mom in the movie Water. That girl is the devil. Yeah, it's not an uncommon thing, especially in in the 70s in the United States. I mean, the United States is still a really religious country, like a very Christian country, I should say.
And clearly, like Ed and Lorraine Warren must have been very religious people because like,
if they believed in demons
and crosses,
and
priests,
use religious incantations and religious prayers and stuff. So yeah, I mean, it seems like it's kind of a confirmation bias, I guess. Like the people who believe in demons are the ones who always seem to see them or deal with them. Yeah. Whereas if you're not really a believer, then you never really have any encounter with them. I guess there's probably a few stories of people who are like, I didn't believe and then this happened and now I'm a believer or whatever. But
like I personally don't believe in demons or like angels. I'm not like religious, so I don't believe like that what people witness. Like if there's like an encounter with like an entity or like a spirit or something, I don't believe it's like a religious like figure. Yeah. You know? Mm-hmm. But I think there's like ghosts and spirits and like other entities and things that exist beyond what we can like perceive, but I don't think they're like religious things because
I mean, I say that too, but it always kind of brings me back. This is kind of a different episode that we'll probably do in the future about the exorcism of
like the Annalise.
Yeah,
what was her name?
Annalise, the German girl.
Yeah.
I can't remember her
They
name.
made a movie, Emily Rose.
Yeah, I can't remember her last name, but she, like, when she was during the recordings of her, what's her name? Annalise Michelle, Michael. Anyway, just the whole idea of like demons and stuff during the recordings of her exorcism, they asked what the names of the demons were that were possessing her, and she named like Judas and Hitler, which is
Yeah, but if you're like already like religious,
well,
you
that's
know those names.
Yeah, true. And especially if you're mentally ill and religious, like if that's a like that combination. For example, for most, if you're religious and say like schizophrenic, your paranoia becomes based on demons and angels and stuff,
exactly.
and or like getting messages from God. Whereas if you're an atheist and you're schizophrenic, you tend to lean more to like I don't want to say reality based, because it's not reality based, like what your paranoia and your fears are when you're dealing with them in like going through schizophrenia, but they're less tied to religion and more tied to like something that you might believe in on like a regular day.
Totally.
Yeah. So, there's definitely like a correlation, I guess, between those kind of claims and what you believe throughout your life and what you've been taught.
Yeah.
Because I mean, that Annalise girl was heavily religious. Like her whole family was extremely religious. So, no doubt about that. In this case, I mean, like I was saying, it's the 70s in the United States. Like, it's a fairly religious country today, like still when it comes to Christianity and stuff like that. So in the 70s, I imagine it was an even more conservative time and an even more religious time. So the story that they were selling of like demons and stuff like that, like there's a reason why it sold and why it was believed by so many, because it wasn't out of the realm of possibility for a lot of people who believed in these like demonic entities and stuff like that, who were malevolent and trying to find or establish some place in our world using the bodies of the people that they could manipulate and stuff. So there's definitely a lot of reasons why it was such a popular story, especially at the time. Also, it came out around the same time, I think shortly after the Exorcist movie. I think the Exorcist was early 70s.
Was it 70s or 60s?
Was it maybe 60s?
I should look that up. I don't actually know.
Yeah, but yeah, like, you have from what I understand, The Exorcist was a fairly successful movie when it came out. And so
73.
Yeah, so 73. So The Exorcist being like a fairly successful movie coming out, and then the book came out 4 years later. So and I mean, again, you're in that time where you have the combination of religion pushing, I don't want to say pushing, but like kind of running with the idea of demons and angels and stuff like that. And then you have like the Exorcist movie, which is all about demon possession. And then you have this book come out that's claiming that it's based on like a true story about these like demonic entities and hauntings and stuff like that. Like, it was just it was like kind of a really good combination of the narrative at the time, the like the narrative of religion, the narrative of the media, and at the time, like, they didn't have the advancements that we have today where you can kind of disprove a lot of this stuff too, right?
Yeah, so it's easier to get away with it.
It's a lot of hearsay, and like, there was paranormal investigators, obviously. I mean, there was one paranormal investigator who who went in and claimed that he just didn't believe what he was being told by the Lutzes. Claimed he believed it was a hoax from the get-go. But you get the Warrens to go in and claim that the stories are actually happening. You get the family claiming that the stories are happening. You get an author to write the book about it, and then a lawyer involved to help the defense lawyer of Butch himself to get involved and kind of push this whole idea. It's kind of the perfect storm of marketing, I guess.
Well, you see the success of The Exorcist.
Yeah.
And then you're like, oh, wow, this is a great opportunity, this house. So
yeah. And I mean,
people
horror
were murdered in here. We could totally turn that into something.
Yeah. And I mean, horror was at that time probably really gaining momentum. I mean, you got, because I mean,
it was like changing a lot too. Like
yeah.
It was becoming more like violent and like
there was a lot less
slasher kind of stuff.
Yeah. There's a lot less. I mean, there's a lot less censorship nowadays, but even at that time, it was getting more and more lenient, I guess, when it came to what you could show in movies and stuff. So, and yeah, there's just a lot of aspects to the story that would make it compelling just on its own, and then to have supposed evidence to back it up, being like paranormal investigators and stuff. It really took off. And I mean, I don't hate that it did. Like I said, it's an awesome story and a really creepy story. And the movies, I think, like, obviously some people aren't going to like the movies or whatever, but every Amityville horror movie I've seen has scared the crap out of me. And I'm not even 100% if I believe in it. So,
yeah.
Like, not the Amityville horror itself, but just ghosts in general. So, yeah, I don't know.
I think horror movies and stuff are probably like the easiest to like capitalize on and to like make money off of, because you can make horror movies like for like very, very cheap, and people watch them. People like that stuff. And
speaking of horror movies that could be made for cheap,
what?
me and Justin, when do you plan on having it out?
I want to have it out probably before Christmas.
So hopefully before Christmas we'll have a little found footage movie coming out.
Yeah, made on an extremely tight budget, but feature length.
With me as an actor, so it's probably not great. But, give it a shot. Tell me I suck at acting if you feel that way.
Yeah, so hopefully before Christmas that'll be out. Wasn't actually going to bring that up, but it's a good...
It seemed like a good place to throw in a little shameless self-promotion.
I keep forgetting about it. I've been editing it for a while, so I'm hoping to have that done.
Yeah. So I mean, I got nothing else to add.
Me neither.
All right. Well, hopefully you enjoyed. If not, let us know. If you have any ideas for future episodes, send them our way.
Any comments on this episode?
Yeah. Any your own input on the case itself.
Critique on the podcast too.
I will say we are trying to figure out the audio situation right now, so give us a little bit of time to get all that sorted out.
Recording these things kind of on the fly in different locations.
Yeah.
So like we don't have like a studio space in one spot.
So give us a little bit of time to get all that sorted out.
Things will get better.
If you don't want to wait, just don't listen. It's fine.
Millions of podcasts out there.
Yeah, there is. I mean, I'm sure there's like countless on this subject alone.
Oh,
so,
totally.
Thanks for listening, and catch you on the flip side.
Yeah. Talk to you next week.